Hello and welcome to this episode of Superhero Ethics. Today we're discussing the movie Jaws, a movie that has absolutely no relevance today because it's about a silly little topic like business people wanting to keep businesses open in the face of a tragic disaster. Nothing to do with anything today, just a little bit of fun. And we have some great people involved, and we get into all that right after this commercial break that we have no control over. Welcome back. I'm Matthew, your host. And I have to say, one of the most fun but sometimes draining parts of this job is coming up with topics all the time. And so one of my favorite things is when one of my regular guests, someone who's pretty much a co-host at this point, can come to me and say, hey, I have this great idea I want to talk about and some great guests we should bring on. And Ashley Coffin did that with the movie Jaws. So Ashley, it's so good to have you on. What happened? How are we here talking about Jaws today?
It's actually happened over a very drunk evening in Philadelphia after PAX convention. My friend Katie, friend of the cast, does the online D&D and met a great group of people who have amazing sound, and their show is just, I've listened to a couple episodes of your show, Mark, and it is a lot of fun, especially for someone who doesn't know as much. It just seems like really, really such a good idea. And I wanted to do more with that, but then we started talking about Jaws.
Yeah.
And then you said that your friend Steve absolutely loved the movie and wanted to talk about it. And because of how culturally impactful the film is, not just for people, but in the film industry, and like what happened with making this movie just changed things so much. And I just can't wait to dive into it.
Definitely. Well, let me do some quick introductions for our guests. So first, just reference Mark. Mark Garkusha, when not lending his voice to various commercial products or dubbing international reality shows, Mark Garkusha, who also just had his name horribly mispronounced by myself, writes, produces, and acts in his actual play Dungeons & Dragons show, the Cast Eye Podcast. So, Mark, great to have you here.
Thank you. And it wasn't that. It's Garkusha, and, you were pretty close there. So it's in the neighborhood.
We have a track record for doing that, so it's on par for.
Makes sense, yeah. I am on record as talking about Stan Sebastian and his great acting. So me and names is a thing.
Stan Sebastian. I knew who you meant.
For The Witcher, him and I both couldn't stop saying Geralt, and I don't know why. I know his name is Geralt, but...
It happens sometimes.
Also joining us is Steve French. Steve French is a voice actor, currently heard as the promo voice of the Book of Boba Fett, something I will shamelessly take advantage of for my Star Wars Universe podcast, on the national commercials for Toyota, and is the host of the Unsolved Mysteries podcast. And Steve and Mark, I understand you've had a long relationship talking to each other about these things, but you do not currently share a podcast.
No, not yet.
Every conversation is a possibility for a podcast. So we're hoping for the right one. We don't know what it'll be. This was probably, we're going to do this at some point anyway. So thank you for having us, and
thank you so much.
Talk about this. Yeah, it's so fun to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have you all. So why Jaws? Like, talk more about what it is about this movie in particular that is so exciting to you all, especially as people who are in the industry, to kind of get into wanting to talk about more.
I mean, it's like, it's hard for me to put into words. Like, I love this movie. So, but I'm going to try.
This is not going to be good. If we're starting out that we don't know how to put into words what we think about this movie, then we're really off to a bad
I've prepared an interpretive
right before
dance.
The dam breaks. Don't worry. The levee is just going to bust.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But I mean, like, it's, I watched it as a kid, way too young. I remember my uncle had it on, like, Betamax and VHS, and it was like on HBO or something. So like it was on one TV, and my cousin and I were like, this is too scary, we're going in the other room. My uncle put it on VHS in that room, and we're like, okay, forget it. And then he put it on, so it was playing on every TV in the house, and like we couldn't escape it. And it definitely messed me up as far as being scared of going in the water. But like beyond that, even like watching it for the 1,000th time last night in preparation for this, like it's just, there's this like timelessness, and like I feel like I'm there when I'm watching it. It's at once like calming, which is maybe weird for a movie about gruesome shark attacks.
I feel the same way. I feel
it's like soothing, and like it is timeless. Like Spielberg does such an amazing job with making it such a like visceral experience that like it never loses relevance especially, today when we're talking about, keeping beaches open when there's a quote unquote shark in the water. But yeah, that was my rambling answer to that first question.
There you go.
This movie is a miracle. That's the only way I can put it. It's a miracle in so many ways. There's no reason this movie ever should have been as successful as it was. It's a miracle that it got made in the first place. It's a miracle that they translated this sort of rambling book with a very interesting dramatic kernel of an idea into this absolutely iconic, unforgettable, instantaneous blockbuster hit. But I remember too seeing it too young with my family, and like Quint, spoiler alert, there's a guy named Quint who gets bitten by a shark. You never, ever forget it. What that felt like to watch that first time. Quick story. I saw this movie in 2014 again. I was doing a show out on the Cape, actually, at our beloved Monomoy Theater, Mark. And they had reopened a movie theater downtown on Main Street, this small, intimate little movie theater, and they were playing Jaws. So I was like, of course I'm going to go see this. And I went with a pal of mine and her 10-year-old son.
Oh, no.
Wow.
And I just sat like this the whole movie.
Yeah.
Watching him. I, of course, knew every line of the movie, but I wanted to watch him. And I will never forget the sound he made when those jaws came down, and the sound was this. It was like this unexplainable, I have never seen that before. I don't know how to process this movie never leaves you. Ever.
Yeah. It's so true. So some of our audience may not have seen this movie. Something you should definitely rectify if you can. And if you want to hit pause now, go watch it. I would definitely recommend that. There will be some spoilers in this movie. It's about a shark. It eats people. Sorry. But let me give a quick plot summary. There's no way I'm going to convey it all, but let me know if I miss anything huge. So we open with a bunch of teenagers at a campfire. Two of them are being a bit flirty. One of them a young woman kind of wants to tease a guy, and one of them, a young woman, is flirting with a guy a bit, and so she runs off. She starts stripping naked and jumps into the water. Because we know that the rules of disaster movies are that teenage female promiscuity equals death.
Yeah, it does.
She gets to be our first shark victim. And it's done in this way of like, you just see her above the water, like being tugged back and forth. You never see the shark. So cut to, we are introduced to our main character, who is the sheriff of the town. He finds out about the shark attack. He wants to close the beaches. And the main tension of the movie is kind of introduced, at least for the first half, which is that this is a beachfront community. It's where the summer community drives the entire economy. If people know about shark attacks, if people get scared about shark attacks, the whole town's going to close down. And you can't have that happen. So they open the beaches against his protests. There's another shark attack. A young boy is killed, which I was kind of like, whoa, modern day movie, you don't do that.
Yeah.
Like, you don't see anything, but it's clear it's a young boy who gets killed. Now the town shuts down, but now there's a huge fervor. We're going to go kill the shark. We're going to kill the shark. All these people go crazy about it. Some people make very stupid decisions trying to kill the shark. But eventually a shark is killed. The whole town celebrates. Meanwhile, a very, very, very young-looking Richard Dreyfuss has shown up in town as a marine biologist. He convinces the sheriff that, no, this wasn't the right shark, and so they have to go back out again. They try to talk the mayor into closing the beaches. He wants nothing to do with it again because business has got to stay open. That's what's more important. There is yet another shark attack, and that's what finally convinces the mayor that we have to go out on the boat. And there's one very hard moment to watch, but very powerful, where the mother of the young boy who was killed confronts the sheriff and slaps him across the face and says, you hid this information and my boy is dead now because of you.
Which was not fair.
Again, not fair to
his
him,
fault.
but very fair to like the powers that be. And again, no relevance whatsoever to anything in our own world today.
Right.
So then we get into the second half of the movie, which is the two of them, the sheriff and the marine biologist, along with Quint, the aforementioned, who is a shark hunter, boat captain with one of the best New England accents you've ever heard in your life, as Robert Shaw tries to cover up his English accent to do a Boston accent. It's wonderful. They go out to try and hunt the shark. It's very clear that they're outmatched. They do various things to try and defeat the shark. And you get a lot of great tension as it's going on. You start to see the shark for the first time, but still mostly underwater. Quint, we realize, is really wrapped up in like his personal crusade against sharks, in part because of a horrible experience he had when he was in the Navy in World War II that we'll definitely talk about, where he saw a lot of his friends get eaten by sharks. But as part of that, Quint both doesn't want to use, like, he wants to just take on the shark himself, to the point of destroying the radio that would let them call in the Coast Guard for help, being so reckless that he destroys the engine. And so his death winds up being very, like, earned in that kind of way. But eventually, the shark wounds up with a canister of compressed air in its mouth because of reasons, and our sheriff hero is able to shoot it, explode it, and the shark dies. Goodness and justice prevail in the town in New England. In a way that the more animal rights side of this podcast would have some real questions with, but we'll get into that as well. But yeah, so did I cover the basics of the movie, at least enough for us to talk about?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. It's not a difficult plot, it's small beachside town under attack by a predator. All of the people who live in the town could be potential victims, and a cover up.
Right.
Like it's very, what they wanted to do was like a crazy action adventure story, but that's not what we got for reasons we'll get into later. Like they wanted more of, like not King Kong, but Godzilla. Like they wanted this to be like a monster movie. And because of the shark, that is not what we got. And that is why we have such a great movie now. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Definitely so. We'll get into that. I think, Ashley, you put a comment in the notes. The one that I was having the same thought of is that, the first Alien movie is often thought of as being so good in part because you almost never see the alien. It's so often done in shadow, and that was in part for budgetary reasons. And the same kind of thing here. It sounds like for all these bad reasons, we didn't get as much of the shark as we wanted, and that's probably a lot better.
Yeah.
But so what was the reception of this movie? Why? It's a very big deal in sort of movie making history. What happened with this movie?
Where to start?
Just in terms of like the reception, what happened when this movie went to theaters?
Well, people loved it. It's kind of like how you would say with The Exorcist, like people were lining up around the block to see it over and over again. Like kids, I remember like kids my mom would drop us off at the movie theaters and we would just stay. I would stay, maybe watch it once or twice, just doing whatever. Like I watched this movie over and over, and it didn't matter how scared I was every time, like even going to the beach, because I went to the Jersey Shore all the time. And that's where this story came from, was an attack off of the Jersey Shore. And yeah, I like fear and horror movies. And it's just like every time it was just creating this new like danger. Being that age, you're like, ooh, I'm going to watch Jaws again today. And now I'm going to go to the beach and see if I can go in and deal with that. It's not healthy, but that's what I did.
Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned The Exorcist, because like those Jaws and The Exorcist are two movies that the audience response to like the horrific things that were happening on screen was so intense and like so unheard of at that point. That like I know there was like one incident of a young woman who saw Jaws and like had like a psychotic episode where like she would for weeks afterwards like wake up like screaming about sharks, or like just like while awake start freaking out about sharks. And they did studies about these two movies specifically, and like how they elicited such a huge response in people. So like I think, in addition to like the groundbreaking nature of the fact that it was like such a huge blockbuster and all these other things, but like on a different level, this like kind of like really insanely intense reaction that people had to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I know in terms of the effect of the movie long term, like I don't think we have Shark Week on the Discovery Channel if it's not for Jaws.
No.
I don't think we have anything near. And that is both good and bad, in that like the further interest to it. I know people like I did a lot of research. Like, people who study sharks talked about how this led to a lot more funding and things like that. It also led to a huge increase in shark hunting, and shark killing. And there's a lot of things that have gone into that. Jaws is by no means the only thing, but the number of sharks in the world today is about 30% of what it was when the movie came out. And the movie is definitely credited as leading to a lot of the hunting. The food industry part of it, there's a lot more to it. It's not just the movie's fault by any means, but it's a very important situation there. But yeah, but also in terms of the movie itself, this was the first summer blockbuster. Am I right? Like, this was the first.
Yeah.
Like, talk about that. What was the reaction in theaters like?
Blockbusters always used to come out around the holidays.
Yeah.
So choosing to do it in the middle of the summer was pretty brilliant.
Right.
Because summer is usually, which is the opposite. I mean, blockbusters now, but summer was considered a dead time for movies. You weren't trying to like make a big hit. It was just if we had movies to churn out, we'll get them out and we'll put them in the summer. You can go see something kind of fluffy or whatever. And this like totally changed the game. It was just an instantaneous hit for I can't even remember how long it was in the theaters, but just kept going.
A year.
And going. Yeah.
A whole year.
Wow.
And it was the first movie to create like merch. The t-shirts and the shark teeth on stuff. Like, it was the very first thing to have such a massive merchandise push. Like, and everybody thought that the movie was going to do terrible. Like, Richard Dreyfuss went on a talk show and flat out said it was a bad film. He feels bad for everybody involved. That he didn't blame Steven, but he blamed Universal Pictures. Wow. And then it came out the next week, and he probably felt like an idiot.
And you have to imagine, too, that having such a rough shoot, they probably all just so like mentally and emotionally exhausted after dealing with it. How could you even be remotely excited about this thing?
Right.
And they probably, if it had been a flop, they would have just said, good riddance, and we'll forget about this and we'll never talk about it again. And so then here they all are, if you watch some of these documentaries, it's like 30 years later, they're kind of laughingly talking about this movie that was just a nightmare to create.
Traumatized. It went 100 days over schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like 100 million. Wait, maybe not 100, but like what, 4 times the budget? I think that.
I think the budget was $9 million, and then the movie made $472 million.
Yeah. Well, the return.
And then they were like, ugh.
And in terms of launching careers, we referenced Steven earlier. The director of this is Steven Spielberg, and this is his first. I think he'd made one movie earlier, but like this is the one that he's credited for often.
Yeah.
Certainly, it's the one I think that's thought of as launching his career.
He did another action movie called Duel. And that's what he was worried about, was being like typecasted as just like an action, like the Michael Bay of that time. Yeah.
Before that was Sugarland, or after Duel was Sugarland Express, which I've never seen, but it was like a Goldie Hawn led picture. That got really good reviews and everything, but obviously we're not here to do a Sugarland Express podcast.
Right. That's next week.
That's next week? Okay, great.
I slowly put away my life commemorative Sugarland Express issue that I had prepared.
Shelf of Sugarland Express action figures behind me.
The thing about the summer blockbuster to me is so fascinating, because now I think of that as such a big part. And it's one of those things where, as I understand it, a lot of times you get this perfect confluence of, the right movie or the right piece of art or whatever it is at the right time, along with other conditions. Like, I do wonder if the mid-'70s, this movie came out in 75, is also when a lot of movie theaters started adding air conditioning.
Yes.
Because
Until
that happens, a summer blockbuster is just not because you're not going to go into an unair conditioned theater when it's 95 degrees out.
That's actually something you see in all those photos of the marquees when this movie was out, was, now air conditioned, now with refrigerated air.
That's wonderful.
I didn't know that.
It truly is that confluence of those things happening is actually what made that possible.
Yeah.
That's kind of the brilliance of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And kind of like that idea of like things that we've been coming back to here a couple times, of things like happening perfectly to make this like phenomenon happen. Like, the fact that the production, but like, Ashley, when you said, about the return, like this was the most profitable movie ever made. And then you also said about the merchandising and all that stuff. It was the most profitable movie made until Star Wars came out a couple of years later.
Right.
And, Spielberg and Lucas are buddies. That begs the question, like, I wonder if Jaws's, like, merchandise push influenced the same thing happening with Star Wars.
I would, yeah.
I mean, George Lucas, he made most of his money because he insisted in the contract that he get the exclusive merchandising rights. And I imagine seeing this is probably a big part of what led him to think that that's a good idea.
George Lucas almost broke the damn shark in this.
Yeah, that's right.
Bruce,
right.
He was hanging out one night and he got in its mouth. Well, it's actually Steven Spielberg's fault. He pulled the lever to close it and the mouth broke, and then they all just ran out of the studio like bad little kids.
I mean, they were little kids.
Yeah, they were like 26.
Yeah, Spielberg was 26.
It's funny isn't this like this boys club, these like rebel filmmakers, and we think of them now, they're like the Hollywood elite, right? And some people be like, oh, they're responsible for all the Hollywood crap that we put up with now. I mean, these guys were kids at some point and were making it up as they went along and helping each other out and getting ideas. And I think that's one thing I love about this is sort of the teamwork that it took to get this stuff together, and they're always feeding off of each other and giving each other ideas. So it's sort of like this this cool support system amongst them all.
Yeah. I mean, the animatronics behind Jaws, like you don't get Jabba the Hutt without probably all the problems that happen with Jaws, So we keep referencing it. Let's dive into it. So what were the problems with making this movie? What made it such a hellscape of a creation?
It's funny because one of the producers from Universal said if they had read the book twice, they never would have done it. Just seeing, because they didn't really think about it. And it's funny you said Sugarland Express because I completely forgot. The producers of Sugarland Express were the ones who Spielberg was meeting with, and he saw the book Jaws on the table and was like, what's that?
Yeah.
And that's kind of how that got started. And it is funny how everybody gives these young people a chance. They're like, no, we know that he can do this. And it was supposed to be a completely different movie.
Yeah.
I mean, having to film on the ocean alone, let alone put an animatronic shark in the water, is like everything went wrong with Bruce. He named Bruce after his lawyer, Spielberg.
Bruce being the shark.
Yes,
yeah, and so they did it all on land and in fresh water, and everything was fine. And it was when they got to put the shark in the salt water, everything went to shit.
Yeah. Sank immediately to the bottom of the Nantucket Sound.
But fascinating that they found a place, that whole area, they could be like 12 miles out at sea, but then still it was only 30 feet below. So you could actually construct something that could sit on the ocean floor and they could still utilize it. And then to take over this town.
Martha's Vineyard.
It's funny. I grew up in Maine, so I have in a small town in Maine, and so I have this sort of these people are close to my heart because we are a summer community up there, and you do depend on those summer dollars. We need those summer dollars. But can I just pause for a second? Is it weird? I mean, something about this movie is like, we have to be able to go in the water, right? It's so we'll talk about this at length, I'm sure, but it's so relevant to what's going on, right? And I think to myself, I'm not a beach person, so I'm like, I don't care if I can't go in the ocean, but that's the whole idea, right? Our identity is wrapped up in this one activity, and people, you can't just stay out of the freaking water for a couple of days, a couple of weeks until we figure this out. But so I'm intimately acquainted with needing those summer dollars and what a small town would have to go through.
I think it. Okay.
No, please, Matthew, please.
I think it's one of the themes in the movie is, and this is kind of this is by no means unique. This is talked about in literature and movies for millennia, but the idea of humanity's feeling of we can conquer any part of nature. There is no part of this world that we cannot go into. We can go into the water. We can go to the moon, or we can go to the our North Pole, and that's great part of science and exploration. But sometimes it leads to this incredible stubbornness of just no, we don't have to worry about the hurricanes. We don't have to worry about the sharks or whatever it is. And I feel like this movie captures that well. There's such a because you're right. On some level, the people can't go in the water. They're going to have to go to the restaurants. They're going to have to go to the store. I mean, The reality is, though, they just don't go, and that's where you lose the money.
Yeah.
But you think there's got to be a way to profit off of this. But yeah, it's just that idea of if we can't go in the water, then we're not going to go. We're not going to spend money, and just nothing is possible.
Well, and it's also people just being told not that they can't do something. I remember in the scene when they're having the town hall when they're like, we're closing the beaches. And then the mayor's like, only for 24 hours. There's a woman in the back 24 hours is 3 weeks. You're the problem, lady.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is after a young boy has been killed. I get, and first there is some of that. It's clear the movie clearly has this idea, but also it's clear the people in the town are like, she was a promiscuous town girl. Like, she kind of got what they think, like she ran into a propeller or something like
Right.
that. It's clear that, but when it's the young boy who dies, you kind of expect now the whole town to be like, no, this can't happen. But nope. Just, again, we got to keep the businesses open. We got to get the dollars coming in.
The numbers are going down. The numbers are going down, people. Okay, so let's get things back.
People are going to get eaten by sharks. It happens. Everyone's going to get eaten by a shark.
Just yell barracuda. Does it have to be a shark?
Right. Right.
Yeah, that part I also loved. Because so much. Yeah, it's funny because I remember when we were first getting into the time of recognizing that maybe the government wasn't giving us the most accurate information about COVID, and that maybe we were being pushed to go back into a bit like. Again, I don't want to assume where anyone else stalls in this, but like from my perspective, at least, when the government was not taking seriously enough the restrictions that we should probably be putting into place, I remember there were a lot of memes that came out about this.
Yeah.
And again, as I said, I was watching it with my partner. She hadn't seen it for the first time, and one point she looks at me and goes, "This is about COVID, isn't it? Like, how was this movie made 40, 50 years ago?" And we were laughing about it because I remember when I hadn't seen this movie again since I was 10.
Wow.
And so I remember when the memes came out, I was like, oh, okay, I don't really remember that in Jaws, but I guess maybe it's a little bit of a subtle thing. Rewatching it now, I'm like, it feels like it was written today, in terms of it is such a but I think it's part of the point of it is like this feeling of business must go on and we will try to deny the tragedy that's happening. That's not new. Like that's been a part of us for
the book
ever.
Gets into that a lot more. Like most of the actual plot of this book is not in the movie. Half of the main character, like major characters who are also on the mayor's side, like trying to cover this up, a lot of their stuff is cut. And it started just to become like, as the movie was changing and as they had to like evolve with that, they had to create a new way to film it. But they were doing script writes the night before. Like all of the cast was involved. Most like Roy and Richard a lot were involved with writing the scripts the night before. And then all of it's kind of like a lot of ad-lib stuff, like, doll's eyes, dead eyes.
Yeah.
And it's just it was a really interesting and new way to take on it. I know the writer halfway through of the book was like, well, I don't see myself like any of my story in this anymore. So I'm just going to back off and let you guys do it. What you want, which never usually works. The books are always better than the movie, but this like they're different, but they're equal.
I said to Mark last night, I read through the book. I did an audiobook of this over the weekend because I'd never read the book. And I said to Mark, it makes me love the movie 1,000 times more. For that exact reason, Ashley. It's like, how did that happen? That never happens, right? You always say, there's this thing that they do in the book that's so cool. If there's any way they could have done it, they do everything better. They streamline that book, and they do everything better in the movie.
Mm-hmm. It's rare.
That's it. Yeah. And I think it happens with Spielberg, like with Jurassic Park, not to the same extent, like I loved, Jurassic Park, the book. But I think the movie is, a little better.
I agree.
But yeah, with Jaws, like they really, they cut so much, superfluous, I think, stuff like I mean, like in the book, it's all about like the mafia is like pushing to keep the beaches open because they like have a hand in all the businesses and stuff.
It's a little intense.
Yeah, there's an affair between Hooper and Brody and all this stuff, or Hooper and Mrs. Brody.
Okay.
That's a different movie.
It's a different movie.
Listen, either option is
Hooper
very spicy.
Hooper's the scientist. Brody is the sheriff, and Hooper's the scientist, played by Richard.
I don't want to nitpick here. It's Chief Brody. Is Chief the same as Sheriff? Is it the same thing?
It's Chief Brody, you're right.
Okay,
and I don't think so. Maybe that town's too small to have a sheriff.
I don't know the difference, so somebody can.
He's the chief of police. It's so often the sheriff in that role, and part of it's also, it's a very different time, obviously, but the setting of this is very similar to the TV show that came out on Netflix, Midnight Mass, which is a real favorite. Like Midnight Mass is about this a town like this that's been dying for 40 years.
Yeah.
And in that, the police person is a sheriff. And so I think that's part of why I'm confusing the two.
Yeah, I see that.
But yeah, it's Chief Brody. Thank you.
Chief Brody.
But yeah, I have to say, I think if they put the mob thing in, that would take so much away, because now we have this sort of now I don't have to wonder if I was a business owner if I would make the same choices, because it's the mob. It's clear. It's bad.
Yeah.
Making it about people who have no like evil motivations. They just want to keep their businesses open. Like
Right.
to me, that makes it so much more insidious.
And the book
Yeah.
is very,
absolutely.
very much like New York centric. So it's sort of, you can tell in the book, it's like takes place off the coast of Long Island. All the people are coming from New York. So there really is this big city influence. Whereas in the movie, Amity is sort of literally an island unto itself. It's its
Right.
own thing. In the book, there's this sort of tension about the town is dying. We need this summer or we're done. The businesses are shuttering. There really is this doom that has nothing to do with the shark. And whereas it's different. So in the movie, it's sort of like, oh, here's this sort of pleasant little seaside town, and everyone seems happy, and it seems relatively prosperous, and nothing's So they really, again, they streamline it to sort of the central drama of man's hubris against the animal kingdom.
Yeah. Speaking of man's hubris and production issues on this movie, they originally wanted to train great white sharks. Like,
Oh God.
and that to me is like, it's like the ultimate like producer coming in and just saying something so
We're gonna train
asinine.
the
Like,
sharks.
guys, okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna get some great white sharks. We're gonna train them to do this, to do the picture. Like, who thinks that you can like?
They tried too. They go what that disaster that happened. That's in the film. They filmed that stuff off of Australian coast, and they got a smaller person to go into the cage to look like it was supposed to be Hooper in the cage, and immediately a great white shark went over the top of the cage and started spinning around, and everybody's freaking out. The guy had gotten out, but that actually happened, and it's in the cut of the film. And you're like, why is the shark so much smaller?
Yeah.
But because they had to get the guy. Thank God the guy got out.
Right.
Yeah.
But like for that to immediately happen, it's like, all right, so we can't train the sharks.
Yeah.
Back to the drawing board.
Yeah,
You know,
that is very funny, and like it's such a huge thing, and it goes back to this, like crazy things going wrong, leading to this amazing movie. Like, spoiler alert: in the book, Hooper dies. Hooper was supposed to die in the movie, but because when they were shooting that like second unit thing in Australia, and they had the little person, so they got like the smaller cage and a little person in the cage to play Richard Dreyfuss, and they had like 14-foot sharks instead of like a 25-foot shark. So trying to do all this stuff, but like when they had the actor in the cage, the sharks were just kind of like swimming around and weren't going for it. And then they brought him out because this guy had no diving experience. He had no idea what was going on.
oh no.
He was like, he was a stunt man.
He was like a 4'2" stunt man. They're like,
but he
get in the
he
cage.
like rode horses. That was like he was the stunt double for kids riding horses.
Yeah.
So he had no diving experience, and like they pull him out of the cage, and then like the shark just destroys the cage. And like if the shark had decided to do that 10 minutes earlier, we probably wouldn't have this movie.
No.
It's funny. Last year, towards the end of last year, there was the Hollywood strike that was possibly going to happen, and workplace safety was a big thing they were talking about. And then there was the shooting on the movie that happened because of non-union stuff, and that's still an issue that hasn't gotten fully resolved, that needs a lot more investigation. And I'm just, I remember during that discussion, people talking about like, and like, we don't even want to talk about the bad old days when like, and I'm just imagining a union rep of that time, like, you want our actors to do what with sharks?
Yeah.
Like, no.
Yeah.
Well, the orca sank when everybody was on it, actors and everything. And Steven's like, can we get the actors out of the boat? And the sound guy's like, can you get the 70-year-old sound guy out of the boat with the $30,000 equipment?
Yeah.
And it's just thinking, they're like, we should get that guy first, Steven.
Yeah, that was like
they had a lot of
the
problems.
boat they were shooting on. The orca's the boat in the movie, but it's also it actually sank.
They had two, and one of them was not supposed to sink, and it sank.
Yeah.
I think part of why I love these stories is it's so incredibly meta.
Yeah.
The movie is about the foolishness of thinking that for commercial reasons you can like ignore the dangers of nature. In order to make a successful commercial movie, they ignored the dangers of nature again and again, and it kept biting them in the ass.
Well, Steven Spielberg says to this day he won't go into the ocean because he knows that the sharks are just waiting for him because of him making this movie. Yeah, he does not. Yeah, he wasn't there the last day of filming because he thought that the crew was going to throw him in. And now he doesn't ever shoot the last scene of his movies.
Oh, really?
It's working.
That's funny. Yeah, he's doing okay.
He's doing all right.
He's
fine.
I believe he's had a couple hits since Jaws. I'd have to look it up.
He's lucky though, because he thought he was going to get fired every day.
Mm-hmm. Taking the meta-ness one step forward, or one step further, do you know, was there reaction from like beachfront communities to this movie? Like, because I do know that like beachfront tourism went down for a while after this movie because people were so scared. And I'm again in that meta way, I'm imagining business owners being really upset about
Like
this.
mad.
Or like mayors of Nantucket or Martha's Vineyard. Do you know anything about that? How that played out?
I don't, but it has to be true. I mean, what was the tagline? You'll never go. Or, well, I guess the just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water, right? Is that for the sequel? Is that
that's for Jaws 2.
Jaws 2.
Mm-hmm.
But the same thing, right? We were talking about before. It took over our consciousness every time, even just reading the book, I read that first page of that book. It's like, no, I'll never. There's no reason for me to ever go in the ocean again. I'll never.
The great fish move silently through the night water. That is like. The book's not great, but that opening line is so good.
Oh, Mama
It's
mia.
so good.
Yeah.
But we spent time, Mark, you and I, swimming the rip current waters of Chatham, Massachusetts.
Great White Central.
And they do have in years recently they've had a lot of great white issues and. But I think there's much more of a respect now. Let the sharks do the thing. We're not bothering you. Just do your thing.
Right.
I think that was maybe the dumbest thing I ever did, Steve, was with you that time when we swam through the rip current, through the boat lane, to a sandbar with a bunch of seals on it.
Preposterously dumb idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talking about the hubris and stupidity of man. The men in this.
Right.
In this instance, being Stephen and myself.
Well,
Had you seen the movie before you guys did that?
This was 20 years ago,
Oh, yeah?
but yeah, we'd been watching Jaws for a long time.
And it was a terrifying swim over there, or were you just like too gleeful? And then you got over there and you're like, uh-oh.
it sounds like between the current and the boats, like the sharks were not the concern in this
Listen,
situation.
Cape Cod is not a very safe area to be boating. The tides there are crazy. The sand dunes shift. I mean, we've gone on boat tours out there where you'll see a very large pleasure cruiser just marooned on the sand, and it can't move until the tide switches around and comes back in.
Look, I spent 4 hours in traffic trying to get out to Chatham one summer when my family got a house out there. Yeah, it's there's a lot of dangers out there.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I'm glad we talked about that also because I think that is, and this is something that's brought up a lot when you read scientific understandings of the movie and stuff like that. If there's one thing the movie does get, it's a fantastic movie, but phenomenally wrong. This idea of shark attacks are almost always provoked. It's always, when humans are going into shark territories are scaring them, or there's blood in the water of some kind, or when it's there was an attack in New Jersey that I think was the inspiration for the book and the movie in 1960.
Oh, it was
in 1916.
way more than just an attack.
It was like
I think it was 12 people died in 3 weeks.
Four attacks.
It was 5 people were killed in 12 days.
Yeah.
Right. But that happened in 1916, and we're still talking about it. It's a horrible thing, but that's not normal shark behavior by any means.
No.
That's kind of the point there.
A side note, did you guys see that surfer who got attacked by 2 great whites at once? He got out of there, but he was just about to do his, thing. And one shark came this way and one shark came that way, and they were great. And they knocked his surfboard and he flies out of the air and he actually didn't get bit. And that's when it was like, they attack in pairs now. It's already bad enough. But yeah, that was one of the craziest things I've ever seen. Right. You definitely have to watch that.
I'm going to have to look that up. And then never go in the ocean again.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that I think is something that happens in these movies a lot is how much we want to personify. Whether it's the monsters or the shark. They definitely act as though the shark has a personality. It knows who these people are. It knows they're hunting him. It wants revenge, which makes the movie fun, but has no scientific basis.
No, well that's Miss Vera Fields, the person who did the editing on this. She got one hell of a job put in front of her. And not only did she's the one who created the suspense. They study what she did in this movie in film schools, and they will probably forever because it was the way that she cut it. Because of, giving that shark, the shark is the star, and she gave him the personality. He's intelligent. He's careful. He mocks our main characters. There's just a presence about him, and that was all her.
Yeah, you get it's funny to me how long they spend on the boat. They're out there for a good almost 24 hours, and it's in part because Jaws is playing with them. Like it's definitely a like, you know, you get the sense that this shark could destroy the boat at any point, but it's enjoying, like, you know, toying with them for a while.
Yeah.
Big smart fish. And then you got John Williams' score.
There's
And Spielberg thought it was a joke when he played it for him originally. He's like, what is this?
Yeah.
He's like, oh, you'll see.
And there's so many different, you know, like the Baroque sort of horns that are happening when the ferry boats of people are coming in, you know, the tourists. There's these incredible symphonic themes that are in juxtaposition to just that mama, mama, mama.
Yeah.
There's that, and then I mean, the shark chase is, you know, fast fish. I mean, that is like such an exhilarating sequence, right? But it's made even more so by this music that almost has no business being in this kind of a movie, yet it all makes sense. Every piece of the music makes sense.
It's the adventure. It's like the adventure park gets brought back in.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously the shark's theme is terrifying and like affects some kind of like our lizard brain or whatever, or caveman brain or whatever. But like then there's you have like these like lilting like kind of like like joyous almost moments. You know, and it reminds me a lot of like Peter and the Wolf. You know, there's like all these kind of like, you know, lilting fun things, and then the you know, it's.
Spielberg does that. He did it with Poltergeist too.
Well,
the music's a little too happy.
and I think that's a perfect way of capturing it, because one of the things that makes the movie so powerful is this sense of like, it is this perfect idyllic, you know, it's July 4th on a beach town. It's people grilling hot dogs and kids playing in the water, and what could go wrong? And then this like malevolent force of nature is literally eating people. Yeah. And so just like think of, I hadn't even thought of that before, but the way the music perfectly captures both sides of that is just amazing.
Well, it's the attack. Like they had to do that because they're not showing us the shark. Like once they weren't able to show us the shark, you have to build a ploy and fake out tension. It's like the scene when the two guys are fishing off the dock. We don't see anything, and that scene is terrifying because of the music. Right. When the deck part that, you know, pulls back around and starts coming back in, and as the shark gets closer, they bring the music up, and it starts to get faster, and then it just ends, and nothing actually happens. But you are white knuckled, sweating, like all from two notes.
The other aspect of the movie where that happens, and I want you all may know more about the making of it. Would love to hear it, but just from what my understanding. There's a long sequence towards the end of the movie while they're hunting the shark. And I admit, I think this sequence might go on a bit too long, but still very powerful, where what they're trying to do is hit the shark with harpoons that are then attached to these yellow barrels that won't go below water. And I Googled a couple times trying to figure out like what's the actual like hunting aspect of that, and couldn't find anything. And a lot of things were like, we don't quite know what the shark hunting strategy was there, but apparently there's no way the shark will pull 3 barrels underwater. But when I did more looking, what I found was that part of it was once they realized the shark wasn't going to do the things in the ocean they wanted it to do, they came up with this idea of, if you knew that the yellow barrels are attached to the shark, having the yellow barrels go back and forth across the water now signifies the shark, like with the dock there. And I just thought, what a brilliant piece of filmmaking of taking this complete failure to do the thing you wanted to do, and so instead giving us this like, yellow barrels, that's it, they'll hold the shark up, don't ask questions, just be scared.
Right.
And
it is, you know, it is actually, oh, I'm sorry, actually, it is the barrel idea is in the book. I think they're wooden. It's not, you know, like this big yellow, there's no blinking light that's attached so they can see it at night. But so that is sort of a general idea that they were probably going to use anyway, but then I'm sure at some point they went, oh, wait a minute, this is all we need. I mean, and I guess this is a perfect time to say that literally my favorite scene in any movie ever is the 3 barrels going under the water towards the orca with nothing behind it. And I just recently learned, I believe how they accomplished that was they hooked, and I think that's how they sank the orca. There was a hooking mechanism underneath the orca itself that acted as sort of a counterbalance to it. So the boat was attached to the barrels are attached to this rope, which loops under the orca and then is attached to another boat. When they drive the boat away from the orca, it pulls the barrels towards the orca and down. It is the most astonishing practical cinematic craft, special effect that is literally happening in front of you. It is so terrifying and brilliant. And like you said, I mean, just that simple thing, and Spielberg accomplished what he wanted to, which was to never see the land once they're in the ocean. And just that, I mean, you look at that and you go, there's no way that you don't believe that a 25-foot shark is swimming underneath that boat.
Exactly.
Right.
They did that with the beginning.
Yeah.
With the girl. They had two ropes on her. And then they're like, okay, go. And she was like, I have to scream and I have to act. So if something really goes wrong, they're not going to know that I'm acting. And then I think Steven did the final, like pulled her down under that last, like very dramatic, like, whoop. It's just practical, but making it up as they were going along that's what's amazing.
Yeah. And like one of the things that really stuck out to me was the use of I forget the exact term, but like the box that they put the cameras in to keep them dry. And like that is what allowed them to film at like that level of like just
level
above the water. Yeah. And that's what Spielberg talks about is like he wanted to shoot it like not, 5 feet above the water, not like under the water, but like when we're treading water, like where our eye line is. And that I think is what makes it like so like, like it triggers that part of our brain. It's just like terror,
the stampede of everybody when the boys fake everybody out and like the elderly people getting trampled. I would be the adult that'd be like, give me that goddamn knife, kids, and throw the kids off and kick myself back. I
love the two guys who just like bulldoze little yellow rafts full of kids. They're just like. Flip them over, get them out of the way. Those two guys.
Did that guy show up to the beach by himself? Like, what is he doing there? He's just like, I'd love to go. Like, there are people that go and tip cows. Like, I just love to go on the beach and mess up.
Flip kids over.
And there's that famous outtake of the, where they show the like the second unit director directing all the extras. Okay, we're about to roll on background. There's a shark that's been in the water killing people. Blood is everywhere. Okay, you're really scared and. Background action. I mean, it's like corralling all of those people, right? Whatever. Not even just the shark, but just all of these extras, all of these people that are just kind of hanging in the water. Who knows if any of these people? Some of these people probably didn't even know they were in a movie. They're just going to the beach.
Shark.
Yes, exactly.
Well, especially because again, we're so used to computer effects now. We're so used to thinking this is so easy. Like, I love you telling that story because it reminds you how difficult this is. Because to me, like the thing that if I like close my eyes and think about this movie, the shot that comes to my mind is the way they show the little boy dying.
Oh man!
Which is that it's a whole bunch of kids.
That was
and
funny.
The music builds, and then you just see this like burst of red in the water.
So they had pumps under that little child, and they just were like, let them rip. And I remember seeing an interview with the kid. The kid was like, I was kind of drowning in it. Like I couldn't get away from it, and I was out there by myself, and they couldn't do it. So in the end. 2 guys had to go under the water and hold his legs down and hold the raft while they shot it to get that, like him pulling out. Cause it was just like shooting him away. And he drowned a little bit during it, but I mean, it's for the shot.
Yeah.
There's so many times as I'm listening to this, granted, I'm not in the industry at all, but I'm thinking, it's amazing what they did.
I love the 70s.
I don't want them to ever do these things again.
Yeah.
Like, no one should be allowed to do this to actors and actresses.
See, I think you get a better film. Like, look at The Evil Dead. Look at the things that you have to do where the people actually put through a little bit of stress.
Right.
And it comes through in the performances.
Well, and famously, there's these quarrels between Robert Shaw and Richard Dreyfuss.
My favorite.
And you can feel it in Dreyfuss's performance. When they are together, something is not right. And so it's the worst kind of method acting, perhaps, but you didn't have to work at that at all because they clearly something, I believe maybe later in life, things were, I don't know, Dreyfuss had a better, I think I heard an interview where he met Shaw's daughter or something, and they had sort of a lovely chat, and everything was okay.
Shaw was doing it to him on purpose. Like, Dreyfuss was a little bit of a diva because he came out of whatever movie he had. Steven asked
American
him to.
Graffiti.
Yeah.
American Graffiti, yeah.
A movie after that did really bad. And then he ran back to, because Steven asked him to be in this. He's like, no, I don't want to be in the water. This sounds like a nightmare. The movie he did bombed, and he thought he wasn't going to get hired anywhere again. So then he ran back to Steven, like, please let me be in your movie.
Well, and so let's talk about those two characters, because I feel like the tension between Shaw and Hopper, you've got on the one hand this like the Harvard educated, or at least big city, like college educated oceanographer who knows everything from books and all the stuff about sharks versus like the actual guy who was in the water when the Indianapolis sank, had so many of his, friends and shipmates eaten by sharks, and he's been hunting sharks for 30 years. They're it's total archetypes. Like there's not, you dig deep, you kind of start hitting a wall, but the tension it sets up between the two of like, here's the, do you approach this problem with science or do you approach it with true grit? And showing that both of them have their flaws. It's one of my favorite parts of the movie.
Yeah. And it was right before they would film, like Shaw would go over to Dreyfuss and be like, mind your mannerisms. And then they would say action and you could just see how.
Yeah.
But I think it made it really real.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to think of what else they were doing.
I don't know how he talks so much that I'd sort of forgotten when they're loading the boat.
Oh, man.
While everything else is going on, Shaw, it's like a 3-minute monologue that I can't imagine was scripted, right? That he just...
No, it was all him.
And he was pretty drunk most of the time.
Yes. Very important thing.
An English actor in the 70s. So.
Yeah.
Famous alcoholic.
Right. Yeah.
And you can, it's interesting. You can see there are scenes where he is clearly inebriated. There's that glistening in the eye and that sort of that slurring of the speech and the sweat that comes, clearly. And I can't imagine having to work with somebody like that. Boy, is it effective.
Yeah.
Boy, is it iconic and absolutely perfect. I mean, pitch perfect at every moment.
Yeah.
But there are things like that were like any other actor would give a completely different performance, right? I mean, when Ellen and Brody are coming down and she's saying goodbye, and it's a constant stream of stuff, which growing up in Maine, growing up around salty New Englanders, I didn't spend a ton of time down on the docks, but working with carpenters and knowing all these people, that's the way it was. That's who they are. They will drive you apeshit if you get one guy just like that that wants to needle you a little bit. I don't know how he did it. And so another actor wouldn't bring that, right? I mean, they wouldn't bring that sort of improvisatory, natural thing, and it makes you believe the entire thing.
Yelling at his wife.
Yeah.
That far away, he knew that she had said something about him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's part of what makes his character so effective, because he's clearly like, there's kind of 3 villains in this movie. There's the shark itself, there's the mayor, and to some extent there's Quint, because Quint is obviously, he has this like, he's very much an Ahab figure.
Yeah.
Like it's him against the shark, and he doesn't care that he comes very close to getting everyone else on the boat killed and certainly himself killed with these incredibly reckless, stupid decisions he makes. Mm-hmm. It's so easy for that character to become a caricature. But especially with his speech he gives, where I've referenced it a couple times, but the story is that the USS Indianapolis, it was the ship that was carrying the nuclear bombs to the airfield so that they could be launched.
It was like the innards of the 2.
Yeah,
atom
so
bombs.
it had like materials on it that made clear that nuclear bombs were part of it. And so it was totally secret. So when it was attacked by a Japanese submarine and sank, like no one knew. So it took many days before like the U.S. Navy could figure out that these 1,000 men were in the water drowning, dying, and thus had to be rescued. And in that time, something like 700 of the men died, and many of them died from dehydration or exposure, but quite a lot was shark attacks. And when Shaw, Quint tells the story of that, like, this is after he's destroyed the radio. This is after he's done, I think it is. Well, he's certainly done so much to make you see, like, this is not a well-balanced guy. This is not a hero. This is a guy who's going to get our heroes killed. But yet you totally empathize with him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just, you get where he's coming from and why he's doing this.
That was the scene where he was like, Steven, I think I should be drunk. And he got hammered. And they did the scene, but he couldn't do it. Like, it was not what the next day he's like, did I embarrass myself? They were like, so then he came in and did it stone sober. And what we get in the film is a cut between cut between those 2 shots just being put together, which is what makes it so important. And it's impactful for the people who survived the Indianapolis, because they didn't hear, nobody talked about that story. Yeah. So them getting to see that someone telling their story on screen and being represented, that meant a lot to those 300 people who survived.
I remember there was some interviews with them where some of them said like that at first too many of their friends got eaten by sharks. They didn't want to see this movie.
Yeah.
But then when people told them your story gets told, they went to see it, and it was really powerful.
That speech is also, it's one of the greatest monologues in film history. And Shaw is so incredible. but the story of it is really interesting too, because like in the like the first draft of the script, it wasn't working, and then because they did so many rewrites on the script, so many people did so many rewrites on this script, like Carl Gottlieb like rewriting every night because production went over so long, but so I think like two drafts into this speech, like John Milius did a rewrite, and he said it was really long, and like and then finally Robert Shaw said leave it with me, and like he went and like rewrote it for himself. Shaw, of course, also being a playwright and a very accomplished writer, and I think in the end with that speech that we get like from however many people worked on it, but like man oh man does Shaw like live it, just inhabit it, and like it's so powerful. Like,
and like a perfect testament to why this movie works on so many levels is that it's the absolute, in terms of like a dramatic arc of the film and the pace. I think the pacing of this film is so exceptional, and it's like right at the moment when we could use that. We don't linger on it for too long, but it relaxes us just enough. We get spooked out by this story. It lulls us, and then we get the song coming out of it, "Show Me the Way to Go Home," and then everything goes to hell. It's just every moment in this movie is so perfectly timed. It's just one thing leads to it. That's why I love this movie so much, because there's never a dull moment. There's never a false moment. And I want to give it, like you were saying, Mark, you're talking about Carl Gottlieb. Let's give a shout out to him, who was hired as an actor, but he's a writer himself. And watching this movie again, I was shocked at how much improvised dialogue there is, clearly among maybe amateur actors that they've hired or whoever is in there. And he says that was one of the things he was brought on to do, was sort of punch up improvised moments. Say, oh, you guys could be talking about this. Maybe you could be, and you can really pick it out. It doesn't stick out like a sore thumb, but you notice all these great, fun little random interactions with people where it's very alive, and these people, and you could tell that the actors are really taking ownership of, oh, I get to be this guy. Those guys, when they catch the tiger shark and the guy's yelling at Gwent, why don't you stick your head in there? You figure out how big his mouth is.
Little guy, get out of the way. We're trying to take a picture.
There are so many like seemingly throwaway lines, I think, from extras that stick with us. Like Ashley, like you said, a day is like 3 weeks, and like I think Steve, we always used to say that, and like I don't find that funny. I don't find that funny at all. Like
I don't think that's funny. I don't think that's funny at all.
Yeah, like, and I think that's like some of the stuff that Gottlieb brought to it, and Spielberg wanted too. Like I remember seeing in an interview him talking about like wanting those little like interjections from all the people. And I think a lot of it is because Gottlieb is a big improv guy. Like he, way back, like was working with Del Close, I think, or at least in the same company as Del Close. But yeah, like those, it makes it feel so like lived in and real. Like these extraordinary circumstances, this like, bonkers stuff is happening, but the people and the town feels so real. I think is a big part of what makes it so incredible.
You're paying attention to the beginning a little bit more, like when Brody's walking through the town, and just I didn't ever really pick up like how annoyed he was by everybody in the town, how much he didn't like the small city, like the kids running around rampant. And what really stuck out to me is this one scene, and we linger on this guy for a minute. He walks out of the sheriff's office with just groceries, and you linger on him, and then you think he's going to do or say something, and he doesn't. He just walks away, and I'm like, what was that? And it's little, when you're really looking, you get to see a bunch of little things, like the scene with Brody and his son. Oh, man. That was all, they were just doing that. And then Roy was like, Steven, get the camera. Watch this. And they did it again. Yeah. And like little things like that. The collaboration between everybody really made it work.
I was surprised watching this movie now as a father. I've got a 6-year-old son. This movie hits a little different. I mean,
I bet.
Especially, certainly that moment, trying to provide for your family and worrying that you're making the right decisions. But the Kidner thing, Alex Kidner is like, oh my God, that idea. Any parent that just, like you want to do the best for your kid, you want to have fun, but then, And so these things are, I mean, I think she shot that scene, 17 takes of the slapping scene.
Yeah,
where she,
17.
like, just beat the hell out of Roy Scheider every single time. But there really is this, there's so many conflicting human emotions going on here. It's not just like a horror movie. It's just real people that are being forced to make decisions, and nobody knows what the right decision is to make, which is why I think when Quint comes around, they have to deal with this guy, right? Because he's their last option. They've waited too long. They've burned up all their other options. So now they have to deal with this. And that's what happens in our lives and in our world a lot of the
One of my
times, right?
favorite thing Quint does is in the town hall, he has drawn on the chalkboard a giant shark with a little boy in its mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just to remind them.
Yeah.
And I want to say two things, just because first of all, just going back to the mayor in terms of like all of the like the humanity of all these different characters and all the different emotions. Again, the mayor could so easily become a caricature, like, and somewhat is, and clearly is. Like, I think there's an element of like, who's the real monster, the shark or the mayor and the business people. But the scene after the next attack, when the mayor realizes like it's his, and again, I forget who the actor is. It's a small part,
Roy Hamilton,
but
Roy Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you. You see how devastated he is by this, and he's trying not to. He's saying like, I didn't know. I was trying to protect the businesses, and that could be a kind of slimy, like, oh, it's not my fault, don't blame me. But you see that he's trying to, like, he's basically dealing with the fact that he got somebody killed.
Yeah.
And he's trying to fight off that he's trying to defend himself to himself, not to others. And it was just, it's heart-wrenching because to me, the fact that he's so relatable in that moment is helpful, because then it's not like, oh, he's an evil businessman. It's like, oh, that could be anybody.
Yeah.
Anybody who had that feeling of like, I'm responsible for keeping this town alive.
I'm going to tell them it was for their best interests. And he's like, yes, you are. And you're going to sign this paper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to go back to the Kintner scene, it is so exquisitely crafted.
No, do you mean the face slapping
Oh
scene?
no, I'm sorry. The scene of the Alex getting eaten. Those
talk about how they made it, Mark. Just
oh my God,
yeah,
it's so good. Those just like because Scheider is there like watching it happen, and he's immediately like he's looking for you see like the old guy come up with his swim cap on. You see like the lady screaming before she gets put up into like a chicken fight thing, and just all like the cuts of the people walking in front of him, and then it cuts to the water, and then the person walks in front and it cuts back. But then when we finally see the attack that create like the shark rolling over initially, and then we have that dolly zoom, like
the trombone zoom.
Oh my God. It's that like the foreground, the background, like I can't speak. It's so good. It's so incredible. And
That's
then
Miss Verna. Miss Verna, she got the Academy Award for it.
She deserved it. They should have given her 2. Like, but Steve, like to talk about, and like that's something I don't have a kid yet. I have a cat. But that scene when like everyone's running out of the water after the attack, and like Mrs. Kintner she's like the last one kind of getting there, and like everyone is like pulling their people out, and she's just standing there, and it is so much more impactful as like an adult, and like as like when you're a kid, I guess you empathize with the kid or whatever, or the shark.
I just
if you're
appreciate they didn't show the dog get eaten. I
that's
know that
thing,
he was taken, but they didn't show it, and they showed the kid, and I was like, do that more.
Yeah, we'll imply that Pippet got it.
Yeah, Pippet.
It ends with that it ends with that incredible shot of just the yellow raft that's now completely deflated and bloody and torn open. And it's so powerful.
Yeah.
You're right. Like, we don't need to see the dead body of a kid.
Right.
That tells it all. And yeah, the actress is so good there.
People still ask her to slap them. They come up to her and they're like, can you do it?
There's a really funny story about Miss Kintner and Alex, where years later, the actress who played Mrs. Kintner went to a restaurant and saw that they had an Alex Kintner sandwich on the menu, and she was like, "This is so funny, I played Mrs. Kintner in the movie," and the waiter's like, "Oh, hold on a second," and he goes in the back, and the guy who played Alex Kintner, it was his restaurant, and so like he came. That's like
awesome.
They were like reunited in that way.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
She
I don't
slapped
think those
him across
actors
the
ever
face and said,
appeared
"What are you
together."
doing making money off of the movie? How dare you?"
Oh, that's hilarious. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, and just to me, you talked about how that scene starts with the sheriff, the chief
Right.
on the beach, and just every little thing is scaring him. And it again, that's so relatable, and this is obviously a much minor thing comparatively, but like for the last 3 months or so, I did just have COVID 2 weeks ago.
Me too.
But for the last 3 months, when like Omicron was getting worse and worse, a lot of my friends were getting it. I would like wake up with like a cough and be like, "Is this COVID?"
Yeah.
Yeah. Or like,
oh yeah, psychosomatic, man.
yeah, my hip would be hurt, and I had to keep reminding myself, "No, I'm old.
Yeah.
I'm just like my body hurts." My partner one day woke up and we hadn't seen anyone in 10 days, and she was like having a little trouble breathing, and she was like, "Is this COVID?" And I had to remind her, "Look, you have asthma. You have bad asthma. That's what's," and just the scene is much more than that, obviously, but just that feeling of. You're so afraid
Right.
that anything could be it. Any shark, any shouting,
Yeah.
anything, any sudden movement.
And that helplessness and like impotence of where like, because everyone runs into the water and is pulling people out, but then Chief Brody is like runs to the edge of the water and then just kind of like
It's
like a frightened animal, like won't go into the water and is just kind of like running back and forth. And I mean,
well, that's
all
what
the
I love
performances
about
are so amazing.
his character
Yeah.
is he's afraid of the water. Like, what are you doing here? And that's when Dreyfuss's character's like, well, what does he say? Like, you move to an island, and he's
Yeah.
like, it's only an island if you look at it from the water.
Right.
It's like,
Great
that
line,
doesn't
great
make
line.
any sense.
Yeah. I mean,
Look, he was I grew up on Manhattan in New York City, and which I think was his character supposed to be from.
right.
You never have any idea it's an island. Like you just think of it's the center of the world.
Yeah.
So I can kind of
Yeah.
get that perspective from him. But yeah, it's one more way characters in this movie are deluding themselves.
That
Yeah.
scene where the shark attack happens in the pond.
Oh my
That's
God.
one of my favorite shots is when the wife comes up and she's like, Michael's in the pond.
Yeah.
And he turns and it was just fake and he's walking, but then it just starts to go faster and the music's
Right.
picking up and he's running through the people. And I just love
Yeah.
that shot.
Yeah. That, and then the shot that always has stuck in my mind.
The first view.
Oh, well, yes, the shark like slowly, like, but inexorably moving towards the guy who just got his boat flipped over. But then like the shot that like is always in my mind when I close my eyes, I think about this shot and why the hell this movie is rated PG is the shot of the guy's leg just like floating down and like hitting and like still like you look at that today and you're like, is that a real guy's leg? Is that a
It
guy's
looks
leg?
Beautiful.
very
It looks
real.
so
Beautiful.
real.
Like, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
unbelievable.
But like it's so terrifying.
And the whole thing of the pond to me is so interesting because we never like get it explained, but it's like sort of an inlet
Yeah.
at the beach that, because at one point the chief's son wants to go play in the water and is like, no, go in the pond instead. And they say the pond, and so you think this is like a completely separate body of water.
Yeah.
And then when you realize, like, no, it's just this thing that, like, but they have this, like, magical belief that, no, it's safe. The shark would never go in
Yeah.
there.
It's an
And
estuary.
again, to me, it's that same thought of the hubris and of the, like, we can defeat nature that is just it's so prevalent today. It's so prevalent all the time of, like, because you look at it, you're like, why in the world do you think that part of the water would be any safer than any other?
Yeah.
That's where the grandmas go.
Yeah.
It's for the old ladies. It's for the old ladies.
I do it for the old man.
You also gotta love the artist that's like half a mile across the
Janis
across
Joplin?
the yes.
Sure.
And like
There's a
300
shark.
people on the beach are like, what was that? What did you say?
Hold on,
it's like
guys.
they're
What?
just standing. The woman way down there is talking to us, and we can hear every word she's saying. Sharks.
How dare you? How dare you nitpick this film?
Shark.
I know.
There's
I'm
a
sorry. I'm sorry. Listen, these
shark.
things that
It's such a good
it all
delivery.
makes sense. Yeah.
It's so true.
And that guy, the guy who gets eaten, it's like I see it as like a PS, like leave people alone.
Yeah.
Those kids weren't asking for your help.
Yeah.
They didn't need your help, and you're like, "What's going? Yeah, are you guys all right? Like, just mind your business, and maybe
Yeah.
you won't get eaten by the shark." The
Thanks,
kids were-
Boomer.
Keep your
Stay
head
in
on
your
keep
boat,
your head on a
Boomer.
swivel when there's a shark in the water.
The shark is just looking out for those kids.
Yeah, exactly.
Except for Alex, but
Yeah.
Just going back to Quint again for a moment. We'll start to wrap up, I think, but let's kind of talk a little bit more about the characters themselves. Quint, to me, and I think the movie captured this well, he feels like he's something straight out of a Hemingway novel. You know, he very much is that. Like, it's his personal battle against the creature. We know that, like, there's a reward, but you don't think he wants it. He doesn't smash the radio because he's worried about losing the reward. It's he needs to be this person who beats it. And to me, it's such. I love the contrast between him and Hooper is such this great idea of, like, Quint is kind of a man out of his time in some ways. You know, like he belongs to this older era, the World War II sailor types, and just the way. I don't know. I just want to hear your all more thoughts about it. I just love so much the way his character is portrayed as being like this last vestige of wanting to hold on to this idea of, like, you against the animal when Hooper is so different.
He's the character who's seen, like, the things that would just chill your blood.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
where maybe, you know, the other one's book smart, and then the chief doesn't know anything about doing stuff in the water. So you have to have someone to guide us through.
Right.
Yeah.
And, like, there's a moment when Hooper they come to a boat that's been attacked, and Hooper just is perfectly happy to jump into the water to go look at it for a minute.
At night.
Yeah. Yeah, Ben Gardner's
So
boat.
stupid.
And while we're talking about Quint, interestingly, the actor who played Ben Gardner, I can't remember his name. He's just like a local character. And he is the person who Shaw based his performance on.
That's
nice.
fun.
Yeah. You know, like in the beginning, or when Hooper's introduced, he pulls him out. He says, "Oh, hello." He goes, "Oh, hello yourself, young fella." And then when they're going out, he says, "Yeah, you wait till we get them out here, and they start busting up the bottoms of their boats they'll wish their mother's mother never met their father's boy." and like just that kind of like rambling, like, you know, nonstop, like crap talking is Shaw does it amazingly. But they do such an amazing job with Quint's character by giving us these like little things that just like paint this incredible character. Like when they're comparing the scars, and, you know, it's I got this, you know, somebody headbutted me at St. Patrick's Day in Boston, and this is from when I broke my arm in an arm wrestling contest in San Francisco, and it's like I'm celebrating my third wife's demise. Like,
yeah.
it's you just like get this idea that this guy's been all over the world. You know, he's done all this stuff, but it's in these like little tiny moments that make this character so perfect.
Well, I think he represents what is so frustrating for him, right, is that he's somebody who has had all this experience, so he knows the way that the world works, and he certainly knows the way that sharks work.
Right.
And so then there's this shark that doesn't play by the rules. And so,
Right.
I mean, as an actor, it's just so breathtaking to watch when he's leaning on that throttle, and when you know that he's given up, when you know that we're screwed. It's that idea that, take him in we'll drown him. We'll take him in the shallow water. We'll drown him. You know that that things aren't the way that they should be, and that's what upsets him, right? There's all these, and that's what's so terrifying about any situation like this. As we were talking about before, sharks usually behave a certain way, but when a shark is smarter than Quint, that's what really sets him off, right? When
you talked earlier about how terrifying it is when those barrels go below the boat, and you just say that phrase. It's like, why is that scary? It's because this person who's supposed to be the authority on sharks has said no shark can take 3 barrels under the water, you know, and like you don't even know what those words mean really, but you see it happen. And I love what you're saying. It's him realizing that his knowledge isn't adequate. He doesn't understand what's happening either.
Yeah, and I think like that the one an aspect from the Indianapolis speech where he says, you know, I was most terrified when I was waiting to be rescued. That's why I'll never put a life preserver on again. And I think that is writ large across the whole like end of the hunt. You know, we're not calling for help. I'm not putting a life preserver on. Like the shark or I is going to die. And like, that's going to be the whole thing. And I think that is like the center of Quint's character.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It does also make me find it interesting that in the original draft, Hooper is supposed to die as well. Because when I think about Shaw's character, like, this isn't intentional. It shouldn't have been this way. But Shaw's hubris doesn't actually cause anyone else's death except his own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like my evaluation of the character does change dramatically if he also gets Dr. Hooper killed.
Yeah.
And like,
He didn't want him to get in that cage. Like
Yeah.
he says something a little nice before he gets in for
right, for
his
Quint.
character.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's funny. That the reason that there's no narrative reason that Hooper doesn't die. It is only because the
Australian.
stunt person came out of the cage and then the cage got destroyed by that shark. And the shot was so good, they were like, we have to use this, but Dreyfus isn't in the cage, so we got to no, he lives now.
He lives.
Yeah.
He hid under a rock.
Yeah, he hid under a
Yeah.
rock.
Because hiding from a creature that hunts by smell is definitely going to work well.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the little things I like that Shaw does is every time they really piss the shark off, the shark splashes them. You have to watch Shaw's face because he's the only one who ever he takes it and he's always like, "Urgh." Like he looks really mad about it every time. And I love that little thing. Like the shark's just continuously like, you jerks, splash.
Yeah. Well, that's why I think of him as an Ahab figure in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
It's so much the Moby Dick story.
Yeah. In the book, he literally dies like Ahab. The barrel comes in, it wraps around his leg, and he gets sucked down into the water, and he can't get loose. I mean, just like Ahab gets, tied to the whale.
Yeah.
Before Steven, I think there was somebody else who was supposed to direct it, and they kept saying the whale. The whale. And so Peter, the writer, was like, you are out. This is not Moby Dick. I don't want my movie to be like this. You said, if you say it one more time, he's like, but the whale. And he's like, you're out. You're fired. Get out.
It's a shark.
So we would have had a very different movie if that guy had remembered to say shark.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, as sort of wrapping up, let's kind of start talking about some of the legacy of this movie. And actually, you've talked about the editor who just did such an amazing job. Like, what is it about her editing that keeps getting you sort of studied in film schools and stuff like that?
It was the fact that so much pretty much went wrong, and they had to make up shots as they were going, and to be able to take this movie and take what was supposed to be a monster action adventure and turn it into this psychological thriller is where she gets a lot of the credit, because she had to, all those scenes that we're talking about, the tension, the Indianapolis scene, taking the shots where he was shit-faced, wasted, and stone sober, and sewing them together so perfectly to create that scene that's one of the best scenes in history is because of her. Like, it's not just because of her, sure, the shots and the actors and everything, but making us have the emotions that we do, the little things, the shots, the shark, what we don't see is what makes this movie work. And it's what nobody was expecting.
And I don't know if it's her or if it's Spielberg, but when I come back to this movie, one of the scenes that I love even more is when Brody is flipping through the books about the sharks. There's something so beautiful in the camera movement, the pages flipping, how we freeze on certain images just for a second, getting this kind of kaleidoscopic effect. I think that, there's a great, in that Alexander Payne movie, Election, he has this what he said was this very expensive sequence of Tracy Flick's yearbook stuff, which is all sort of like CGI yearbook going, blah, blah, blah. And that clearly is all practical, but deciding how, the choreography of that moment and building up that intensity where we're inside Brody's head and you can see that he's getting filled with this fear, just the movement of that, it's like a ballet. It's so amazing.
And I love that scene when he's like, get out of the water. He looks out, the kids are in the boat, and she's like, it's his birthday tomorrow. Don't yell at him, blah, blah, blah. Get out of the water right now. She looks at the
Michael, you listen to your father.
He's like,
I also love that. I also love that editing story, because another thing that's come to light in more recent years is that the original cut of Star Wars had all sorts of problems, and that the editors are credited with a huge part of saving it, and including George Lucas's wife, Marcia Lucas, who is credited for editing a lot of the movie, but especially the trench run scene, which we just think of as one of the best sort of fighter pilot type attack scenes in a movie. And was completely terrible in the original cut.
Wow.
And so I love the idea of if Spielberg and Lucas are this boys club, them both being saved by these women editors.
Yeah.
Like, okay, boys, you go have a drink and stick your head in shark mouths. We're gonna actually save your movies.
We're gonna do the real work. It's fun. We talked a lot about the kind of levity and horror balance, or levity and drama and balance in this movie. And one thing that I think is interesting about, I can't remember who said it, but talking about Fields' editing was that she would take a scene that Spielberg played for laughs and make it serious,
Mhm.
or take a serious scene and like cut it for laughs. And I think that is, again, one of the myriad things that make this movie so incredible is like, you know, these like nothing is like what you expected, but everything is real.
Yeah.
If so
I
much
think so
didn't
true.
go wrong, we wouldn't. This would not have been this movie. They called
Exactly.
it flaws the whole
Yeah.
time. Like everybody working
Oh,
on
yeah.
it called it flaws. It wasn't even just that. Like imagine filming in the ocean and then you have like
Mhm.
3 sailboats go in the back, and you're like,
Mhm.
gotta cut.
To wait for the sailboats to go by.
Yeah.
I can't imagine having 30 more seconds of footage of that shark without it crossing into the line of like, okay, I see that it's, you know, an effect.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
it losing its power if you see more
That's
of it.
why the
Yeah.
second one failed. They went against their own rule immediately in the second one, and you see the shark pretty quickly, and then throughout most of it, they don't have that slow build like you do in the first one.
Yeah, and they
Mhm.
give the shark a burn scar because we need to make the shark scary.
Grizzled.
So let's give it a burn scar.
Exactly. All right. Well, I want to start wrapping up. So, is there any other last things any of you want to bring up? Just like a question or a thought that we haven't gotten to talk about for this movie?
You know, so very quickly, I don't want us to go down a big rabbit hole, but the title is kind of amazing, isn't it?
It's so cool. Yeah, just
It's like weird, right? And I
Jaws.
think it only just hit me that it's like it could be called anything. The book could have been called The Shark. It could have been called The Fish. It could have been whatever you want, but it's called Jaws. And
Yeah.
somehow that it makes all the sense in the world. It like doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it makes a ton of sense. We never really spend a lot of time. You know, it's not like Hooper's got a thing. The jaws on this creature are unbelievable.
Yeah.
I don't know.
true.
It just works. It just
If-
works.
Oh, yeah, it's funny as you say that. I'm thinking like you could so easily have the movie be like the townspeople start calling it Jaws or the newspaper, something cheesy like that.
We gotta
But
go
no,
get
nothing like
Jaws.
that.
Yeah, but we
Um,
all call him Jaws. If you say Jaws, everybody in pretty much the world knows exactly who you're talking about.
Exactly.
Brilliant.
There's one of the previews from before the movie came out, like one of those like really great like old previews. It's just like a continuous like underwater shot, and someone doing the voiceover. I can't remember it word for word, but towards the end, it's like God created the perfect killing machine and gave it Jaws, and like it's like, oh my God, it's so fucking scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
And that is like one of the like the sequels. You know, the second one's pretty good. The third one's terrible. The fourth one is maybe the worst movie ever made.
Ever made.
But like one thing, the legacy of the sequels gave us is, I would say, 3 of the best taglines of all time.
It's
Jaws
so true.
2, just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water. How many times have we heard that? It's like a part of the zeitgeist
Yep.
now. It's part of pop culture language. Jaws 3, the third dimension is terror. It's dumb, but it's funny, like the movie.
Yeah.
And then Jaws 4, the revenge. This time, it's personal.
It's
Like,
the shark's like,
Yeah.
you
It's
killed
a movie
my
about a
uncle.
yeah, you killed my uncle. I'm gonna eat your son. I'm gonna follow you to the Bahamas, and I'm gonna jump out of the water and get speared by a boat and explode.
And the
Michael
Disney
Caine
World.
won't be able to go get his Oscar.
Yes, the Disney World
Yeah.
aspect. Like they could try to pretend like that wasn't supposed to be SeaWorld, but that was totally
yeah.
supposed to be SeaWorld.
Absolutely.
And trying
It
to
really was.
train the great whites. It's just like you almost couldn't make this movie. Why did you think you were going to be able to copy it again?
Dennis Quaid is famous, has said he was on so much cocaine while they made Jaws 3 that in an interview they were like, so you were in Jaws 3, and he goes, I was in Jaws what now?
I love it. What in terms of last little legacies of the movie? What I was gonna, because I had no idea this was true, because I hadn't remembered it. You know, I think it's House. There's a TV show that is made by the Bad Hat Harry production company, and so every episode ends with like the little like graphic of the production company, and it's someone saying that's Bad Hat Harry.
Yeah.
That's
I had no
something.
idea that line comes from this movie.
Yeah, that's
So like I almost fell off the couch when I heard when Roy said that
Yeah.
to when the chief says that to one of the old men in the town. I was like, oh, that's where that comes from.
we
Okay,
know you,
cool.
Chief. You don't ever go in the water.
It's The Simpsons. It's everything. There's quotes, like I'm the sheriff. I can do whatever I want, or however that goes out. Like
Yeah. I can do whatever I
every-
want. I'm the chief of police. Yeah.
everything in pop culture has either tried to copy or has referenced Jaws. Everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
such a lasting influence.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I think that's about a pretty good place to wrap up. Unless, Ashley, do you have any last thing you wanted to bring up?
No,
about the movie?
you guys.
Okay.
Anything else?
I mean, I could talk for about 9 more hours if you want. But if not, no, this is a great place to wrap.
There's not a whole lot that I can say that can't be said in the next 5 years.
We're
same
definitely
time,
having you all.
same
having you
time
all
tomorrow,
back, so-
everybody.
Yeah.
We'll get right back
Going.
into this.
The ethical issues of Jaws 4 coming soon.
Oh God.
This time.
All right. Well,
it's
thank you
personal.
both so much. And clearly, both Steve and Mark, I know you're doing a lot of great things. Ashley as well. But starting with you two, if people want to hear more of your creations, your podcasting, other things like that, where can they find you? Steve, starting with you.
Sure. If you're interested, my website is stevefrenchvo.com. I'm on social media at stevefrenchvo. I host the official Unsolved Mysteries podcast, which we just finished our first season, and the second season is forthcoming in the spring. I don't know when this will air, but in spring of 2022. So you can check that out.
It's exciting.
And
I
is
love
that a true-
murder.
Is like a true crime podcast, or is it a
So
fiction podcast?
the old show Unsolved Mysteries that was famously hosted by Robert Stack, we have a podcast now, and we did a 40 episode season last year, and we're about to start recording season 2. So so true crime, paranormal, missing persons.
Did you do the new episodes that have
Not
been?
the Netflix episodes.
Okay.
This is a standalone podcast, which is sort
Nice.
of partnered. So it's news stories, solely
Cool.
for the
That's so
podcast.
cool. Oh, I'm totally down.
Yeah, so it's
so
really,
good.
really cool. And I mean, talk about things you grew up with. I grew up with that show, and Terry Dunn-Muir, the amazing producer and co-creator. I work with her every
Wow.
recording session. It's like so bizarre.
Talk about a show that just the opening would scare me.
Same thing, right? It's very, very similar in that regard. I mean, so many people that are connected to that show, and it's just Robert Stack's voice, all of those things. It really is just like this movie. I mean, you start hearing that, people really do feel the same way about it. So I'm quite honored to be a small part of that and
Small
continuing
part.
that tradition.
You shut
so.
up.
Listen,
So you're a huge part.
in my tiny shark cage of a recording studio, hanging off the side of a boat in Australia.
Chumming.
So I just have to ask: are you hoping that at some point there'll be some unsolved mystery about like a diver that went missing and it's possibly a shark attack, but we don't know, and maybe you can like dive into some of the Jaws law for it?
It's
Listen,
a
if
boating
you're-
accident.
If you're asking me, do I hope that some terrible tragedy befalls a human so that I get to
course
talk
not.
about
No,
it?
we just
I
hope
guess
that
I
one
can't
already
say no.
happened.
Right.
I just hope like maybe there's a great white shark that's gone missing and his family is looking for him and they want us to find him, then that will be okay. Let's
There
say
you
that.
go.
If you have any
There you go. All right.
information about the location of this shark,
The true story
All right.
of Jaws.
now that part of the promo has jumped the shark. No pun
Yes,
intended.
exactly.
Mark.
as you said at the top of the show, I host the Cast Eye podcast. I'm the DM on the Cast Eye podcast. You can find me a lot of times on Twitter at Cast Eye podcast, or if you just want my regular stuff at Mark Dimitri. That's pretty much it for me. It's not as cool as Unsolved Mysteries. But whatever.
Excuse me. Podcasts about Dungeons and Dragons are the definition of cool.
Thank
you
you.
very
They
much.
Yeah,
are.
we're
That
looking
is
to
a
do a
fact.
crossover event at some point.
It's
so
gonna
that
happen.
should be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I want all these people on the screen on the show. ASAP.
I love it. I just had a lot of fun over. My sister grew up much younger than I am. Hated all the geeky stuff. Her boyfriend at the time, then husband, watched the episode of Community where they played Dungeons and Dragons.
Mm-hmm.
And like the hipster he is, he decided that he and his friends were going to play Dungeons and Dragons, ironically, because of it. He now goes to his local game store every Tuesday to play in the Adventures League Dungeons
It's
and Dragons.
real easy to get pulled in.
And so I ran a one shot for them when they were here over Christmas. That was all about rescuing Santa Claus. That was a lot of fun. So
Awesome.
We had a really, really creepy elves. You would have loved it, Ashley.
I would love it.
So great. Definitely check out that podcast. And Ashley, I think right now it's pretty hard to find a day of the week that you are not recording a
I'm so
podcast for
busy.
something. So what are you up to these days?
We are doing Boba Fett on the Star Wars Universe podcast. You can catch me every Monday nights live on Twitch doing the MCU cast. And this Thursday, we are starting up MCU trivia again, and that will be at Twitch at 8 o'clock. And that's probably going to be like once a month. So come, join, play, win prizes. We got big ones.
Awesome. Yeah. Definitely check all that out. Check out, as Ashley mentioned, the Star Wars Universe podcast. It's my other podcast, which we're doing episode by episode coverage of Book of Boba Fett. We've also now started back up our episode by episode coverage. We have now started back up our episode by episode coverage of Star Wars Rebels. Had a lot of fun with those. Those episodes will be going up. Myself and Matt Carroll are doing episode by episode coverage of The Orville, which is my favorite current Star Wars TV show. And also Ashley and I both guested on PandaVision for Peacemaker. There's just so much great content. You can find all the wider stuff we're talking about by going to the Stranded Panda Podcast Network, just strandedpanda.com. And all of my podcasts specifically, you can go to by looking for theethicalpanda.com. There you'll find our contact information, Twitter, Facebook, email, however you want to reach us, carrier pigeon. We'd love to know your thoughts. Did you grow up watching this movie? Have you never seen this movie and kind of interested in what we had to say about it? Or were you one of those people who didn't want to go in the water? Do you think the movie was just kind of silly? Or do you like Barracuda or Piranha more? What's your favorite, aqua disaster movie? Let us know. Contact us. We love to hear that audience feedback. Steve, Mark, Ashley, thank you all so much for being a part of this. This was such a fun time. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in. Have a great day.
Piranhas fucked me up as a kid, too. That movie was terrifying. The noise.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think piranhas are like quicksand in that, like, growing up, I was led to believe that they'd be much more of a
every
problem
creek
in my day-to-day life than they ended up being.